Hello, and welcome to Khyber Shards, a 5th edition actual play show set in the Eberron campaign world. It's Friday, and so we have Khyber Shards answers today. I'm going solo, and as you can see, we're going to be looking at TaleSpire. Um, this was a thing we kind of tried out. I had been aware of TaleSpire, but the thing that kind of pushed me over into wanting to try a 3D tabletop was that HeroForge opened up their API to a bunch of virtual tabletops that weren't Tabletop Simulator, which I don't love. I'll talk about that here in a minute because we got a question about it. But I thought an interesting way to talk a bit about TaleSpire was to show off this thing that I have built, which is the Grimalkin Manor. So I wanted to take you on a little tour of my build of the Grimalkin Manor. So you can see that all we have is the manor at the moment. We don't have any of the lands around it, any of the greenhouse or anything like that. So we're in GM mode. You could, if you wanted, do it in player mode. So I could grab the City Watch Captain and switch my role over to player. Oh, wait. I have to give myself control of that first. So you go here, player permissions, Summerhawk, and now it's mine. And so if we go to player, now I have control of this mini, and I can change her hit points. I can give her a torch, things like that. And one of the cool things for the players, and you probably will see this in some upcoming episodes because we're going to have to change the way that we do the screen capture for TaleSpire because there were some real problems with it. I'll talk about that here in a minute. Is that as you move into buildings, it will adjust your view. So you come in here and it takes the upper floors off. And so now we can see the entry hall of Grimalkin Manor. Now, one of the downsides of this is that there is no asset in TaleSpire right now for a big dragon statue. So what we've got is this little gargoyle. Was the closest I could do, but it's pretty good. And so we can get a little tour of the interior of the building. So we have over here, in here, so you can see that there's contact. I can't lift her over the walls very easily. Got to go around them. And you can see it's imperfect. Where did my mini go? We're just going to go back to GM mode and worry about that later. So we have this little foyer in the middle. So one of the things that's kind of amusing to do in TaleSpire and kind of fun in a sort of Lego-y way is there's a lot of assets that TaleSpire doesn't have yet, such as couches. So I had to build the couches from other assets. So I found these kind of decorative looking block table things and laid cushions on top of them and other cushions laid against the wall as a back. I'm not 100% satisfied with it. I've seen some better ways to do it since, and I'll probably go back and change the bases out for something more wooden. We got the little foyer here. Another thing I would say is lacking is nice looking tables. There's a lot of sort of rough cut tables, and there's real big fancy tables. There's not a lot of, say, this small size table that doesn't look like it should go in a tavern. Over on this side, we have a kitchen and a pantry. There were no big ovens, so I had to build them out of wall sections and cobblestones. But I'm really happy with how that came out. I think it's pretty cool looking and kind of implied a big chimney on the back side here, even though it's not really built into it. Over here is the dining hall. One thing that's difficult about turning a regular map into a TaleSpire map, is that you are dealing with not exactly things fitting to scale. So the regular map had big long tables, but not quite so huge as the TaleSpire one. So this TaleSpire table, that's what, that's 20 feet long. Yeah. So to get a nice looking table in there, it only has one, whereas the map I was using had two and they were arranged differently. But this worked. Little dais with the chair. over here we have the student dormitory, a little common area for the students right here, and going into their bedrooms. In player mode, you can open doors, but not in GM mode, or not GM mode. Oh yeah, you can. Yeah, right here. It's just a right click to open the doors, and the door opens. Isn't that cute? So we have our beds over here. There we go. You can adjust this little slider over here. You can see this green slider, and it changes the threshold. So this gray slider adjusts your camera height, and this green one adjusts the threshold at which it takes layers off so you can see. So if I drop this down, it'll remove more things. If I raise it up, it'll bring more things in. So for the moment, here, see I got our bunk beds, little foot lockers. This is a storage room, was a dining room for a staff. I haven't really done anything with it yet, but it'll probably be storage. Leading out to the backyard with the stable, and on out into the lands where we would find Esri's greenhouse. Continuing over along these back rooms, we have a little planning room back here, and then another common area with some tables that leads into the library. Our shelves are not very stocked with books yet, but we'll get there. And Thora's office going through here. We have Thora's office right here. Thora's office needs some more seating, but we're getting there. And the secret staircase down. If we were to go down there and lower my threshold here to lift up the bottom floor, we find the Undercroft. We need to have just a bunch of storage rooms, and a workshop for Forge with a big old fire. And this was the room with the bottomless pit. I assume that Forge would have at some point covered it. And then a big practice space, our danger room, which we haven't really done much with yet, and a little armory over here for storing weapons. Back up to the upper floor. We can go out back and find this little garden seating area with our Dragonborn statue, which remarkably, TaleSpire had a Dragonborn statue, so that's cool. And these patio areas, which I really like. So one of the things that I found frustrating in TaleSpire is there weren't a lot of good window options. You could get kind of arched Gothic windows or little tiny castle windows. So what I ended up doing was just leaving big gaps in the wall and then filling them with these portcullis pieces, which I thought kind of implied big multi-framed windows. It's not ideal, and I'm kind of hoping that TaleSpire, it's still in early access, so we'll still get more stuff. I'm kind of hoping that TaleSpire will soon update to have sections with large windows or even just glass panels that you can put in place. But for the moment, I think this looks pretty good as front for the window. Another thing missing from the description of the manor is we described there being big fountains up here. TaleSpire doesn't have small fountains to fit there right now. They just have gigantic fountains, and so there's no fountains here yet. But again, one thing that's requested by the community a lot right now is object scaling. I can scale a miniature, so if I bring that watch captain back, and I decide that that watch captain is actually a giant, I can go to GM tools, I can set the scale, and I can make her large. Right? So now she's a real big one. And I can make her even bigger. I can make her gargantuan. And so now she's a Titanic watch captain who shakes the ground when you set her miniature down, which I think is really hilarious. Get rid of that. So there's our view of the ground floor. Going up a level to the second floor, we get this stuff. So we get our mezzanine level for the library, and I went with just real big, can't really see very well. One other thing I would like to see is ditching the atmospheric thing with the view, because honestly, I would really like if everything was just lit, instead of having to direct the sun's angle. It's cool, and I can imagine situations where I would want it turned on, but I wish I could just turn it off. Went with just big windows along the upper floor of the library, and extended this patio outside of Pog's room because I thought it looked nice. Here's Pog's bedroom with his blanket pile. Oh, there's a mini we lost. With his blanket pile, weapons on the wall, weapons on his area. Bathroom, there's not much in the way of bathroom assets yet, so the bathrooms here are largely just empty. I'm assuming eventually we'll get some bathtubs, that sort of thing. Leading out into this upper level of the foyer and over into Thora's room. Thora's room's a little more well apportioned. It's got a big bed. It's got a nice window seat, fireplace, bookshelves, writing desk, and her large bathroom and walk-in closet over here. Takes us out to the common area of our senior students. We've got a little sectional and writing area over here with a fireplace, table, chairs over here with a fireplace. There's not a lot of good rug options. You can lay a rug down. One nice thing is you can cause stuff to clip through other things in build modes. If I go into build mode here, let's say I wanted to add a rug, so I could take this rug pile from Pog's room, go over here. If I push Control and hold it, I can bring this up and down. And that's pretty cool. And so I could sink that into the floor and then angle it around. So I could kind of go like that. That doesn't look too bad. I might actually leave that. And put that in front and lift these chairs up so they're sitting on top of it. And then you have a little rug. So you can do that, but it would be nice if there was just a piece that was a rug sitting flat on the floor instead of only piles of rugs. So that would be a nice little addition, in my opinion. Moving back, we have Ari's room, and again, there's no queen-sized beds that don't have giant canopies on them, so I just laid 2 beds together here. Turn build mode back off. One nice thing about build mode is you do get this little light, and that lights things up better, but everything kind of bounces when you mouse over it. So, and his writing desk where he's working on his comic books. He stole the vanity from what is now Thora's room, and like everyone else, he has a little balcony. Over to Esri's room with an alchemical station. I know we've said that he's moved a lot of that out to the greenhouse, but it felt like a good way to identify it as Esri's room. Again, no bathtub because they don't have it. And again, a doubled bed to turn it into a queen. Over here, we have additional rooms and a bathroom. Arlo sleeps over here in this room at the end of the hall. Not much in there yet. We have an extra room that, could be Forge's, but Forge probably just stays down in the workshop, doesn't need to sleep as a Warforged in quite the same way. And then we have what ought to be Shade's room, but it's just a pile of stuff. She's got a couple of furs, she's got her backpack and some things, because of course Shade sleeps out here on the balcony. And I'm particularly happy with how I built Shade's canopy and hammock space with an additional sleeping area under on this big balcony space. I really like the way this balcony looks. I'm pretty happy with that. And so that's our second floor. And then of course we can go up further and drop the roof back down. And there you have it. So that's the Greymalkin Manor tour. I'm going to expand this map to the whole grounds. Maybe. I'm not sure yet if there's an upper limit on how big you can go in terms of before you start to lose performance. So we'll explore that. In the meantime, we have some questions. So Emily asked, roughly how much time did it take you to build the dock on TaleSpire? Let me see if I can go over to the dock. What was that one? 3? Yeah. Okay, so here's the dock with its miniatures. So I started by using a mod to lay a map down to try and sort of use it as a template. I ended up abandoning that pretty quickly because the scales were off and it just didn't quite fit, and built it more or less freeform. However, I didn't build a lot of this stuff. You can find links to these things in the description of the most recent episode, but One cool thing about TaleSpire is that you can copy whole boards, or you can copy sections of a board. So if I wanted to share this little building I built when I was just practicing, I can go here and I can copy a slab. A slab is a section of a map in TaleSpire, and I just draw a box as far around as I want to go, and then I bring it up as high as I want to go. And now I've got this, and I can adjust the sides. So if I don't want to get any of this, grab that there, bring it over here, and now I can copy that slab and move it around. But by doing that, one of the other things I can do is I can share that slab. There's a substantial community on TaleSpire. They've got a Discord that shares slabs. There's a website called Tales Tavern that has things that people have built. And so this map was built using a lot of that. So this big ruin started out as something I found on the community and borrowed. You can find links to the creator of that in this video, as well as in the video from the last episode. And then because it was just the ruin, I added a lot of plant life and wanted it to be much more overgrown because we're in the jungle. And then I also added a tavern in it. I decided that someone had built a tavern in the ruin, and I added some lights. And so we got our ruined tavern that really didn't come into play, but it was there. Threw a bunch of miniatures into it. These buildings back here were likewise all built by the same creator who designed sort of modular set of really cool buildings. Let me take you on a little tour of some of these things. These have a very great nautical theme, which is why I used them. So come down, yeah, start lifting stuff off. So you can see we've got a little herbalist's garden up here on top, and a trap door to the bedroom, down into the little shop. I love that everything's covered in grass on this. And then down into the lower floor. So you can see someone put a lot of work into making that a really unique little space to explore. Over here, same thing. We've got a kitchen going on right here as we work our way up. We've got some tables and dining area for this little cafe, I guess. And then a little upper floor balcony. Over here, we've got a bedroom above, little house. All right. And a big warehouse over here by the, this is the forge. Got a big forge and table. Forge actually is pretty cool as a, oh no, I guess that's just a fireplace, not a forge. Come up, sleeping room, come up and up. And then the big one, the warehouse over here. You see cranes and lifts and nets and that sort of thing. Storage space for goods. So there's a lot of cool things, and it just didn't come up, and I didn't expect it to because of the nature of the encounter. But there were some cool things, and I kind of like it. And then the ship I built from scratch, as you can see by its very, very simple nature. I know some ways I could have built it better now that I've learned some techniques. This was the first thing I did on TaleSpire, this map here. And so lots of things that I didn't know. I didn't know you could really mess with the clipping stuff through other things yet. And so I thought of some ways that I could have made the ship a little bit better, but really there's not a lot of good curved angles. There are some, but not a lot. And so it's hard to build something that doesn't go at right angles. So I just outlined a ship roughly. And I think for that, it worked pretty well. Again, I knew that it was very unlikely that we would actually end up on the ship, so I wasn't too worried about it. I just wanted something to represent the location of the ship. You can adjust water on this. So I've got the water level very low just to show that there is water, but you could drown the whole thing and have an underwater thing. But for our purposes, that. Again, that's another thing I would like to see in the future is water tiles, where I could just place water instead of having to have everything. Because the annoying thing to me is that it means that everything looks like it's an island, if there's any water at all, because you have to raise the water level for the whole space around. So with the Grimalkin Manor, it just looks like it's sitting on a playmat. And I don't mind that. Like that's kind of fine. But if I have to have water, if I needed water for something on here, it would have to raise water everywhere around it. And that would, to me, that, I don't know, that ruins some illusion. Again, this atmosphere effect turns back on every time you move to a different map, and that's a little bit wonky. So there's, as far as a review of TaleSpire goes, there's still some significant quality of life things that I would really like to see, and that's a big one. So the question Emily had asked was, how long did it take you? Because it was my first time going, I tried a lot of things, had a lot of false starts. Once I figured out what I was doing, that map was probably, well, okay, with all the false starts and stuff, that map was probably 2.5, 3 hours of work. But once I realized how to bring in assets and just place assets, it became easy. The manor has been a lot more experimentation, and many hours have gone into it because I've built it in one way and then torn it down and started it over completely multiple times. And then realized I could do something and redesigned the whole thing. The little terraced rise to the manor got redesigned 3 or 4 times. The windows was a realization later, and so I had all the windows and I had to tear out the windows and replace those. Changed this balcony, the roof line got changed a couple times, the way I had the library got changed a bunch of times. So I've changed this a lot, so it's hard to calculate how long it would take to build it if I just started building. But there's substantial lead-in time. Like that, I don't want to sugarcoat that. Using TaleSpire is a substantially front-loaded work commitment if you're building your own maps. And I'm trying to build my own maps to the degree that I can. Probably use assets from the community, and whenever I do, I'll credit it and put a link to where you can find it if you want to use that asset from the community. It's fine. You can find those in the description of the last video and in this one. Emily also asks, do you prefer a 2D battle map, a 3D battle map, or just Theater of the Mind? And does this preference differ between Khyber Shards and non-recorded games? And Wildchild, Laura asks, is the hardest part of gaming online that you can't create extravagant maps and minis for your players? I put those together because they're related answers. I do love miniatures. I love to paint miniatures, and TaleSpire letting me bring the HeroForge creations over is a big draw for me. What I actually prefer is a 2.5D. What I mean by that is I would love a map that would let me place a flat image on it, take one of my Tom Kartos maps or something like that, and just place it down, and then raise sections of elevation. Just that. Raise sections of elevation, and then give me some 3-dimensional assets. It'd be really cool to be able to lay the map of the manor down here, and then just toss some assets onto it. Or lay a map of the docks that I had intended to use down, and then raise different levels of it to create elevation. That would be really, really cool, and I would really love it if any virtual tabletop would do that. And honestly, if any virtual tabletop would do that, I would probably switch. So that would be my ideal. I like 2-dimensional tabletops just fine. At my home games, I tend to use 2-dimensional maps and some scatter terrain. I have a bunch of dungeon tiles from, the Warlock dungeon tiles that have been coming out recently from WizKids, and I like them. They're cool, and I enjoy using them. And it, however, is again a fairly front-loaded process. And so you've got to decide, I've got a couple of hours to work on building this map if I'm going to use it. Sometimes that's worth it. Sometimes it's not worth it. I have a lot of 2-dimensional maps, and so sometimes it's not worth it. For a lot of encounters on Khyber Shards, we will just theater of the mind. We will continue to just theater of the mind um, because it won't always be worth the effort to build a TaleSpire map. TaleSpire map creates a lot of interactivity that's really cool. Uh, with the docks map, to go back over to it, the really cool thing was the elevation. The fact that Casey immediately thought, oh, I want shade up high in that ruin in Overwatch. That was brilliant, and it allowed for a cool tactical decision, and it really was effective. And she probably wouldn't have thought to do that, or maybe not. I don't know. She might not have thought to do that if it wasn't there visualized for her. And so that was really cool, and I liked that it gave creativity. I liked having a map because, and I know RA expressed this to me several times, that he had really liked having a map because it meant he didn't need to worry about asking, how close are things together? How far am I from this thing? That kind of thing. Now, it did lead to a bunch of other questions that get real tactical in nature. And that's the downside. Well, I don't know. I don't necessarily say that's necessarily a downside, but in terms of making your combat faster, that is a downside, is that it raises a bunch of other questions of can I do this with the map and that sort of thing. My ideal would be if I could do theater of the mind or a very rough map, but have players who are willing to just take big swings and just say, listen, I see this over there, or can I see this over there? And I just say yes, because it's what I'm inclined to do. That would really be a lot more fun to me than any other option, to have a really basic map, some miniatures, and just have players ready to go big swings. I understand why players are often not ready to do that, and D&D does not necessarily encourage that because it requires a bunch of specific information, especially if you're casting spells. So having a map is useful, I find. And having an interactive map is fun. The players really liked it. They enjoyed getting to move their miniatures around. They enjoyed getting to interact with the environment, try finding, places to hide, that sort of thing. And having the miniatures to move around on the tabletop really was delightful to me as well. I enjoyed that a lot. It did give me some of the joy I get from setting up a big elaborate map at home with a bunch of miniatures and revealing it, and the players are, amazed and that sort of thing. And that was fun. So it did give me a little bit of that fun that I get from the way that I tend to run games at home with maps and miniatures. To your point, Laura, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a way around getting to use miniatures. I'm actually getting to use digital minis. They're not as good. And yes, playing online, if Eric and Colin lived in North Texas, and I would absolutely turn my garage into a recording studio, and we would record around a table with maps and miniatures. Absolutely, 100%, no doubt. Part of this show was the people I wanted to play a game with. And for that reason, you sacrifice. Because, the friends are obviously the big thing. But yeah, absolutely the worst part of playing online for me is that I can't use my props and interactables. Yeah. I like the tactile element of it. I like having little props at the table. I like being able to hand players cards for magic items and things like that. And playing online just makes that harder. So yeah, I lose something. For me, I lose something. Not everyone does. I know RA really he prefers virtual tabletop. He thinks it's better. He thinks it brings him focus. I find it doesn't. I find, now being a GM, I'm focused, but as a player online, I'm very easily distracted. I've got my internet browser right here. It's easy to become distracted. It's harder for me to be immersed online. TaleSpire does some immersion well. It does some things that I didn't realize it did when we first used it, and so there's a lot of fun to this. There's some drawbacks, as I've said. But yeah, Emily, my preference at home is probably two-dimensional maps with scatter terrain and miniatures. For really cool set pieces, I will build a three-dimensional battle battle map, but for most things, 2 dimensions, some scattered terrain miniatures, that's my sweet spot. It's quick to set up, it's clear, and it's just immersive enough. Mia asked what made you choose TaleSpire over other programs like Tabletop Simulator, for example. So I never really considered Tabletop Simulator for this. I tried it again. I had tried it a while back because I thought, oh, this is awesome for Dungeons and Dragons. And then I gave it another try. And I'll be honest, Tabletop Simulator is a wonderful blank canvas. It will work really well for a lot of things. And I know some people who like it a lot and use it really effectively. I hate the user interface of Tabletop Simulator. It's just not intuitive at all to me. It feels clunky, and having to import all those assets from a lot of different sources is just tiring to me. TaleSpire was a $25 purchase for each of us, which is not bad at all, especially for as intense a program as we're getting. It's early access, which is probably why it's less. I imagine it'll be more when it's finished. The one I actually considered most was Harpy. You can see Harpy's stuff at harpy.gg. You can follow them at Harpy. They're a French company that's working on a virtual tabletop that integrates a codex, like a world Bible, and play-by-post capabilities. So I can totally see for remote games where you're play-by-post, having the ability to just seamlessly swap back and forth between that and an actual battle map could be really, really cool. Because one of the issues with play-by-post is having a picture of the battlefield can be very difficult. They do 2-dimensional maps in 3 dimensions. So it's you can move and angle things, and they also will let me use HeroForge. I may show you guys Harpy on another day. But I like Harpy a lot, and we may use Harpy sometimes. It's very simple, very easy to use. They have a lot of 3D assets, but you can't yet import 3D assets other than HeroForge, which is true on TaleSpire as well. I like the appearance of TaleSpire's 3D assets better, but I like the idea of Harpy because Harpy is really close to what I do at my table. Simple battle map, scatter terrain for effect. If Harpy ever gets to a place where they'll let me adjust the elevation of pieces of individual chunks of the map, we will switch immediately, because that would be my ideal. I love that idea. It's much simpler and a lot less front-loaded, and still very cool. If I could just drop some scatter terrain, adjust the elevation of things, but I mean, I don't need the walls. Like, coming over here to this room, I don't need these full-sized walls. They don't do anything for me. In fact, I think they're in the way. If these walls were short, like half walls, whenever I came down, if the upper half of them would disappear, it would be much easier to interact with this room. I don't need the full-size walls. I don't need the building to be perfect verisimilitude. I didn't need the interior of these buildings. They're cool interiors, but I actually think they'd be hard to use in play because they're cramped. And that's what I find in TaleSpire, is that interiors do often feel very cramped. So yeah, I would much prefer a 2.5 dimensional virtual tabletop. And if someone ever gives me that, then I'll switch. But TaleSpire, I liked the assets for. The graphical rendering of it is pretty. The HeroForge integration is great. So that's what sold me on TaleSpire over other things. Harpy I really like, but it's just not quite there. Also, my players really liked TaleSpire. Nathan asks, if we were to pick up a copy of the Korenberg Chronicle, would we learn that anything interesting has been happening in Corvair while our heroes have been in Stormreach? I mean, almost certainly. The world's a big place. You'd probably see occasional suggestion of activities by the children of Khyber. Very negatively presented, of course. You might see strange disappearances and weird conspiracies. Well, probably not in the Korrenberg Chronicler. If you pick up the Sharn Inquisitive, you get all sorts of conspiracy theories about what the dragon marked houses are up to. But I'm not really tracking the big events of Corvair, to be honest. I'm not tracking the politics of Corvair because we're not there, and the politics of Corvair are not really affecting us yet. Now they may. There are some things that I think could pull us to Sharn or beyond on missions, but we're not there yet. So for the moment, I'm afraid I can't tell you a lot. Yeah, stuff's going on there, and when I need to know what all's going on there, I'll know. I know what the 12 are up to, because that's the part I need to know right now. When I need to know what other factions are up to, that's when I'll work that out. So, yes, and I'm sorry I can't offer more detail on that. Anyway, that's a real quick rundown of my thoughts on TaleSpire. I hope you found that interesting in some way, and the little tour of Grimalkin. Hope that was interesting. We'll probably see that eventually in an episode, but for the moment, just a little tour for you, our beloved viewers. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can find links to all of our social media and our Discord in the description down below, along with, as I mentioned, links to the various assets used to make the dock if you would like to play with TaleSpire yourself. If you have any other more specific questions of TaleSpire, how I built specific things, let me know in comments or over on Discord. I'm happy to share if it's something you're trying to get into. There was a lot of learning for me, and so if I can help you skip any of that process and figure it out quicker, I'm happy to do so. So please don't hesitate to let me know. Get in touch with me over on the Discord, over on Twitter, and I will share the bit that I've learned. I'm by no means expert in this yet, but I'm getting better. New episodes of Khyber Shards drop every Monday, and new Khyber Shards answers every Friday. And until next time, thanks for rolling with us.